Hey everyone and welcome to another video. So today I'm going to be breaking down the patch 10.16 nodes, talking about what's getting stronger, what's getting weaker, where I think the meta is actually headed. But I'm also doing it a little bit differently this time. I'm also going to be creating a mid lane tier list, a patch 10.16 mid lane tier list from scratch. I'm going to take every single champion, talk about where it fits in the meta, why, where in the tier list, what are its strengths, what are its weaknesses, given the changes in the itemization, runes, etc., and really come up with a very practical, pragmatic tier list. Now, I haven't done this before. It might take a while. If this is something that interests you, then potentially skip to this section within the video. And I would love feedback from you guys saying if this is something you want to see potentially fortnightly. Me really creating a tier list in real time. So, without further ado, let's dive straight back into the patch notes, to get a little bit of context to see where Riot's actually trying to take us. Now, I have had a few questions from you guys in the community asking my take on Yone. Now, as I said before, I try to keep my channel very pragmatic, very practical. I haven't played this champion, I haven't seen it in my games, I don't know the strength of its base stats, I don't know how well its scaling is, I don't know anything about it yet. So, I'm going to hold my tongue. I don't want to feed you any wrong information. I want to keep an open mind and wait till I see its strength in my games. But when I do look at a new champion, the one thing I do look for is the level of mobility inbuilt within its kit. Mobility as an attribute or a concept in League of Legends is very valuable. And something to help you get your head around and why I believe personally is very valuable is because let's take a mid lane example, a random mid lane example. Let's take Leblanc. And LeBlanc's a champion that is always seen in the meta in some way, shape, or form, no matter what year we're within. We've seen Leblanc in competitive games and in solo queue for years. And the reason is because it has a lot of mobility inbuilt within the kit. Now, what makes mobility so annoying? If you're a jungler looking to influence the map and potentially gank a mid laner, if they have potentially a second flash, or gap close or an escape or mobility, terrain scaling, that sort of thing, it's a massive deterrent for the jungler because then they're going to have to factor in, that person, I have to wait for that person to use their gap closing ability aggressively, or I literally, if they're leaning, I can never gank them, or I need to have a hard CC champion mid to even remotely have a chance of ganking them, which then a lot of the time, if you ward correctly, lean correctly, you can basically never get ganked, posture way more aggressively, and overall just take better quality trades, knowing that you don't really need to worry about the enemy jungler. So, mobility overall allows you to push limits, get pressure that other champions maybe wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. So yeah, that's actually my take on League of Legends. So Yone within his kit, I believe he has mobility inbuilt within the ultimate, although it's not a massive form of mobility. So it is something that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. And yeah, that's like the way I just like to think about new champions. But now, anyway, Akali. So Akali's actually received a few buffs recently. I think the last patch she received a buff to her Q damage as well, which is really, really interesting. Now, something to think about, whenever you see a champion get a buff to their main ability that they max first, you always have to think about how this influences the way it wave clears. So Akali, there's been a lot of rune, I guess, controversy or discussion around what runes you should take on Akali. Now, at the moment, most people take fleets and they go secondary domination for like Taste of Blood, Ravenous Hunter. Now, in the past, back in a few seasons ago, a lot of people used to take demat on Akali. And the main reason was that you could actually use dematerializers on the range creeps, and then at a particular power spike, whether it was on first base or at a certain level, your Q would actually one-shot the back 3 creeps, which in turn would allow you to get a lot more pressure in the lane, have a lot more lane control, and potentially be able to push and move when Akali wouldn't have otherwise been able to do so. So in saying that, I don't know, I haven't tested yet. It'll be really interesting to see if Akalis do try to experiment potentially with a bit more dematerializer to see if this changes her level of wave clear. Because wave clear on assassins is a very dangerous attribute as well. Because then it really opens up your access to the river, to skirmishes, to roams, that sort of thing. So this is a very, very nice buff. Now, one thing you need to quickly understand about Akali and why I'm not she's really on the cusp for me. So I actually had this discussion with one of the Discord community members within the Patreon, and he asked a question asking, where do I think Akali's sitting right now in the meta, and why? Now, this is the way I feel about Akali. Akali so her pre-level, her actually 1 to 6 laning is actually really easy. A lot of the time she can start D-Shield, she has Fleet, or she can even start Doran's Ring, because she's a melee champion, so she gets a lot of healing, a lot of effectiveness from Fleet Footwork, and because Fleet Footwork also scales with AP, and Doran's Ring gives you AP and HP, you get a lot of sustain, a lot of durability within the lane. But conversely, D-Shield against poke is also super effective. So your levels 1 to 6, it's very easy to minimize CS, under tower, or thin the wave, and just stay quite healthy in the lane. Now, because actually in this point of the lane, not many champions have enough mana to actually harass Akali enough, or to a meaningful extent to actually kill Akali. So she can just easily minimize. But the problem starts to begin post first base. When Akali comes back to lane, what is she going to have? She's either going to have a Vamp Scepter, because she's building towards her Cutlass, or she's going to be going a Revolver, or something like that. Or even like, she might even come back with like tier 1 boots, sorry, not Tabi, she like maybe tier 1 boots. Oh my god, my writing's bloody awful. Something like that. So a relatively underwhelming first base. Comparatively to a lot of other mid-mages or assassins, they're going to come back with a Dirk, a serrated Dirk for lethality, which is going to be very effective, or they're going to come back with something like a Lost Chapter and really put down the hurt onto this Akali. Now, generally within this specific power trough for Akali, this is when getting pressure becomes quite meaningful, because then dragons are up, the second buffs are respawning, there's a lot more skirmishing, people are getting stronger, and they have a lot more mana, and especially when the enemy mid laner gets access to the second blue buff, this Akali is going to really struggle, give a lot of pressure, and the game kind of explodes. Now, most people, when they verse Akali, they try to harass Akali levels 1 to 6 when she has D-Shield, you don't have enough mana, you die, you take a bad trade, you don't get a really solid Lost Chapter recall, then Akali can actually minimize that power trough, and respectively get to her Gunblade or whatever. And if she's able to somehow get a kill from a jungle gank or some weird skirmish, then Akali can snowball out of control. But in the higher levels of play, that doesn't happen very often, because people understand that Akali has a very obvious power trough. So that's kind of my thoughts on why Akali's on the edge, on the cusp. Now, in saying that, I do think there's a lot of flexibility with Fleet plus Ignite. There's a lot of surprise kill threat, because you can actually use, I talk about this in my runes video, where Fleet can be used both proactively and defensively. Proactively to act as a form of movement speed buff, so you can close the gap to get in range to use your Q without having to rely on your E. But conversely, as a defensive tool to dodge skill shots with the movement speed buff, and then also stay healthy in the laning phase. So Akali is on the edge. I believe that she is playable, but you got to just really make sure that you're really kind of walking that tightrope post first base, so you don't give the enemy a bunch of pressure. Anyway, so it'll be really interesting to see how Akali shapes up, and something maybe I might potentially want to experiment with. Now, the E change, I heard some people were saying this is a nerf to Akali, because then it makes it easier to itemize against, because people can easily just sit on a null magic mantle, which a lot of people do anyway versus Akali, but because now it's all magic damage rather than physical heal or her burst combo, it makes it a lot easier to itemize against, which I don't really I think is kind of bullcrap. I think this is actually kind of a buff, because not many people actually want to sit on an early null magic mantle anyway, because if they do so, they're not going to be able to harass Akali in the early game anyway. I think this is a buff to her early game all-in threat, so I don't mind that. I think it's a nice little quality of life buff personally. Now, Ashe. Ashe is very strong right now. And one thing I did mention on my stream is that people have actually gotten better at using Hawkshot. Back in the day, not many people understood jungle tracking. And one other thing that is super underrated about Ashe is her E ability, her Hawkshot. If you can spot the enemy jungle and you're really good at jungle tracking, you hold on to it, you should be able to spot the enemy jungle majority of the game. So this is an extremely underrated ability. I can't really tell you why Ashe kind of came in the meta. maybe because Ezreal was in the meta, and Ashe has historically always been good into Ezreal. But my initial assumption, my initial theory, sorry, about why Ashe came into the meta was because of the jungle meta. Because we saw a lot of Graves, a lot of Nidalee, a lot of these, I guess, very low range, low CC, I guess not really dive heavy champions. Ashe kind of comes back in the meta because she doesn't have mobility. Her weakness is that she doesn't have mobility, but she has a lot of utility through her ultimate, her CC, and a lot of sustained damage with lethal tempo and her Q, bonus attack speed, that sort of thing. So if you can get away with Ashe without getting dived by a certain composition, then she's a very strong champion. And she's very good in those isolated 2v2s, slowly poking down the enemy. So it'll be really interesting to see how the meta shapes up. Although this is a nice little, it is a nice little nerf in my opinion. I think it was quite appropriate. It'll be really interesting to see how the AD carry meta shapes up. Do we see more Jhin? Do we see more Varus? Do we see what champions are we going to see more of? Or is the jungle meta just going to change? People realizing there's a lot more immobile champions in the game, and we're going to see a lot more dive heavy champions back into the meta, and then we see more Ezreal again, and then I don't know, or more Xayah, more Ezreal, because you usually see a lot of Xayah and a lot of Ezreal versus very dive heavy metas. So I can't really comment about how this changes laning phase, but that's just my initial thoughts on Ashe in the meta. Now Bard, base health decrease, W max heal decrease. Now Bard is actually very strong in solo queue right now. And even in pro play. So what people realize is that, okay, not many ranged utility supports can afford to go so tanky in their build path and go Guardian, build all these tank items like Gargo or Stoneplate, and just kind of roam around the map and create chaos. And I think people have gotten a lot better with utilizing the ult, because a lot of the time they use it defensively, and now, proactively, but now they realize they can be very good defensively. People are just better at the game, so people realize that there's so much utility inbuilt within Bard's kit, so and the game's a lot faster paced, and there's a lot more roam-oriented plays going on. So Bard saw a lot of increase, in my opinion. So I do like that they are giving him a bit of a slight nerf, because there wasn't much counterplay right now. It felt like he was tanky and he could always roam. He had mobility. He has utility. He has everything. Hard CC, that sort of thing. So I think this is a very healthy change, and they also reduced the heal. So basically they're making him, so you can't be this sustained utility support and a tanky roaming support CC bot. So they're giving him, I'm assuming they're trying to give him more of an identity, being more of that, so he's not a jack of all trades, essentially. So, I mean, I don't know enough about how this will change the laning phase, because I don't really get to play Bard too much, but, it'll be, I think it is a healthy change. Now, Evelyn. People were saying that this was a lane Evelyn patch, like they were saying how with the Q cooldown changes you can play it in lane. I still don't believe that. I mean, I haven't seen it yet. I might be wrong, but my initial assumption is I still don't see how Evelyn could lane. Especially in mid lane, I don't see it. I think there's too many champions that could either severely just one-shot it, like imagine you're playing like a Zed or something that could literally just one-shot it, or you play a mage like Orianna or Victor or Syndra or something, and then it will harass it way too much. And it's, yes, you could theoretically survive, but even if you were to survive till 6, I don't think you're going to have enough push and move potential to be able to impact the map and utilize your passive anyway, or your invisibility. So what this does do actually for a lot of the junglers is that it gives them better wave clears. So say they get a kill, it actually helps them get down the wave, which, you know, it's a nice little quality of life buff for junglers, and people don't really talk about that too much, but that sometimes is a very handy tool to be able to quickly get that wave out, or fix a wave, or get the wave after you get a kill, something like that. So again, I don't know too much about how this affects jungle Evelyn, but I still don't think we're going to see lane Evelyn personally until proven otherwise. Fiora, Q cooldown decrease, on hit cooldown reduction decrease. Now, I was talking to people in my stream yesterday about this. Now, it seems like the way Riot's trying to potentially position the meta heading into Worlds is make it very spicy, because we're seeing a lot of Camille right now. And it feels like Camille is kind of in a league of its own. And in this patch, they actually buffed Jax, and they've actually buffed Fiora. So it seems like they want it to be a potential, you know, aggressive split push meta. I mean, maybe that's where they're trying to take it, rather than buffing tanks. And because traditionally tanks like Ornn have been very good into champions like Camille, because they cannot deal with that early tankiness through Bramble Vest and the likes of those items. But instead of buffing tanks, they're actually buffing the other champions that have traditionally done well into Camille, like Fiora and like Jax, which are somewhat skill matchups. But in the past, Jax has been favored to beat Camille, and even Fiora has been favored to beat Camille. So this is a very big buff for Fiora, and I think she will see a lot more play. And I'm really interested to see how the pro meta changes as a result of this. And because I think right now the only tank that can kind of deal with these champions is Ornn. And outside of that, you're just going to have to adapt and start playing more Jax, more Camille, more Fiora. We might even see a lot more Akali top, because Akali top's actually quite decent into a lot of these champions as well. Like Akali destroys Jax, that sort of thing. So it'll be really interesting. We're a very damage-oriented top meta right now. But yeah, this is a massive buff for Fiora. Yes, they did. So they reduced the base cooldown, but they decreased the enemy hit cooldown reduction. So I don't know what that nets out to be overall in terms of the numbers, but I still think it's a very, very nice little quality of life buff for Fiora. E on Hecarim, bonus movement speed buff. I still think Hecarim is very underwhelming. It feels like if you want to play that style of like being that farm-oriented, carry-oriented jungler, champions like Kha'Zix just do it better. I mean, the way I see it is like champions like Hecarim and Kha'Zix are similar in the sense that they want to farm a lot, and Hecarim really can't do much if he has losing lanes. But then Kha'Zix has an easier time at getting that pick. Like, Kha'Zix will be on 0-0-0, Hecarim will be on 0-0-0, but Kha'Zix has Kha'Zix has a much easier time of getting that one kill through, because his kit is just much easier at getting kills, and burst damage is higher, which means that he can actually get himself into some form of carry position. But in these games where Hecarim's 0-0-0 and he has losing lanes, it's really hard for him to find an in or a way into the game, because his kit's it's very linear, it's very sluggish. So I don't think this is going to change Hecarim's effectiveness. I still think it's a very subpar champion for solo. I just think there's better junglers than Hecarim right now. Jax, E cooldown decrease. Again, a nice quality of life buff. I think they're trying to, again, really make him more of a viable counter pick. That's why, because we're seeing a lot of Camille, more Fiora, that sort of thing, which makes a lot of sense. And in saying that, and one other thing, I was actually talking on stream about what happens when it's a very split push oriented meta. What happens when we see Camille, Fiora, and Jax in the meta? Generally, what is the counter? Well, these sorts of champions are generally combined with very high wave clear mid laners. In the past, we have seen Kog'Maw, we have seen Ziggs, we have seen Victor, these sorts of champions in mid lane, and which is interesting because Kog'Maw mid has actually received buffs. Ziggs mid actually received a buff this patch, which is interesting. And Victor hasn't really been touched, but you see a lot of these 4-1 compositions because these champions, Camille, Fiora, Jax, need the game to be dragged on longer, and the main way to do that is to keep your tier 1 tower alive. And these champions like Kog and Ziggs and all that are really good at keeping tier 1 alive. Now, the counter to this strategy is then to pick very early pressure champions, stack dragons, and stack Rift Heralds. So then what you would do is you'd play some early skirmish-oriented. You could even play like Rumble. You can play a lot of like early strength champions. Lucian with potentially, Syndra used to be a go-to pick. But I'm just trying to LeBlanc, stack early Rift Heralds and dragons because, Kog'Maw, these champions cannot contest river skirmishes, and then use all your rifts to break tier 1 tower. If you can do that, then the game's boomed. So I think there's obvious counterplay to that strategy. And on top of that, if you are versing 1-3-1 composition, say you're versing Akali mid with Jax in the side lane, is 1-3-1 compositions, then generally the counterplay to that is 5-man hard engaged team fight composition. So when we played Cloud9 at Worlds in 2017, I believe, Impact he was so good at champions like Ornn. Like these Impact was very good at these just group play those 15-minute Rift Herald fights at the time, or play these 20-minute Baron compositions. And at the time, when we were at Worlds in 2017, Direwolves, we had this top laner who was very split push oriented. He played a lot of Camille, he played Fiora, he played Jax, he played all these split pushes. And we had a lot of success with that. We even beat a lot of the other minor regions. But then when it came to Cloud9, they knew the counter to this was, okay, cool. You can play this, and yes, you scale well, but as soon as the game gets 20 minutes, we're literally going to start the Baron, force you to come to us, and start the 5v5. Because we have a tank, we can tank the Baron, and we're going to force the 5v5. If you come, we take the front to back because we have hard engage, we can engage on you and kill you, or you have to give the Baron, in which is no point split pushing, and then we can kind of just end the game anyway. So that's another way to deal with those split pushes. So it will be interesting to see if people opt into it, whether it's a bait, I don't know. Now, Jhin, passive final shot, critical damage against structures increase. I don't think this changes much. Jinx, R damage, now uncapped. I don't think this really changes too much either. A bit weird. Was that, so that was a bug. Yeah, weird. Now, Karma, Q cost now flat and cooldown increased. I do think this was a very healthy nerf, because Karma, like they said in their little description here, Karma has continued to be a strong multi-role flex champion. She can be played top, she can be played mid and support. Now, the way I like to view Karma is that she's the ultimate neutralized champion. Now, she won't win lanes, but she won't lose lanes. And that is a very valuable thing for competitive, because if you can just blind pick something like Karma mid, or hold it as a flex, put it mid to neutralize any lane, she's so flexible because she's great in those front to back team fight 5v5 5 compositions, especially with those tankier junglers like Volibear, things like that. But conversely, you can just chuck her in the bot lane and have a really strong pressure point, and then save your counter pick for mid lane and have pressure in true lanes. So I think that Karma's in a very solid spot, and it feels very anti-fun. But in regards to solo queue, the only situations that you generally would want to be seeing Karma is if you're playing with a Graves or like a Kindred. But if you're low elo, then I don't recommend doing this, because then you're kind of trusting that your jungle is the carry. And a lot of the time I don't like having that mindset. I like to be the carry. But if you are playing in higher elo games, maybe D1 plus, then that strategy is quite viable. So I think this is a very appropriate nerf for Karma, and I think this will give Karma more counterplay, especially in the solo lanes. Maybe not really as much in bot lane, because you only put like 3 points Q and then you max E anyway. Sometimes you can max Q, but 3 points Q max E, which, you know, it will affect it. But I think this is largely more of a top and mid nerf. But anyway, Karthus Q damage ratio decrease. I think that's a healthy change as well, because Karthus is in a very strong spot, and I think that champion's actually very strong right now. In those games where, so the way Karthus is as well, the way I like to think about Karthus is he's either completely useless because he wasn't drafted properly and he's got 3 losing lanes or no pressure, and he's got a lot of AP on his team already. But then there's those games where he's got like a Zed mid, he's got like a Camille top, he's got pressure in lanes, and he can just perma farm and becomes this absolute animal. So I think this champion is actually too strong right now, and I think this is a very healthy change. For Kha'Zix, Q isolated target bonus damage decrease. I think that's also a healthy change, because Kha'Zix was in a very strong spot as well. I am keeping an eye on Kha'Zix because I find him to be very strong in solo queue right now. Now for Lucian. I hate Lucian mid, man. I hate Lucian mid so much, but I can't deny it that the kit makes a lot of sense for mid lane. And now the way I like to view Lucian, I'm actually viewing him less of an AD carry and more of a mid lane champion due to his range. Now, a few boxes need to be ticked when I think about a mid laner. What do I think about? I think about pressure. So pressure pre-first base, post-first base. His pre-first base levels 1 to 6 is really strong. He basically gets pressure in like any matchup. which is very valuable in League of Legends, especially now that mid, mid's the game's largely revolved around mid lane because it's such a large pressure point. If you have pressure mid, it leads to more aggressive invades, control over dragons, control over rift heralds, that sort of thing, and it just basically enables your entire team. Now, the great thing about Lucian is because he doesn't have to itemize crit, he can go into Bork, so his build path's very solid. He can go into a first item Cutlass, or even, sitting on Vamp Scepter. He still has a considerable amount of threat, especially when he takes PTA and Ignite. He has a lot of kill threat. If he's versing very heavy AP mid champions, he can also go into Hex Drinker and be completely fine as well. I just find him to be a very insane pressure point. Now, there are some big downsides with Lucian. If you are not extremely competent mechanically and don't have the mid fundamentals down pat, if you die either to a gank, you overextend, take a bad trade, die solo, then you're completely useless because you bring no utility, you're low range, and you're basically, you don't really scale that well from behind. So it's very feast or famine. Man, this is also why you see a lot of Lucian mid and high elo, because they can really navigate and handle this champion very well. And the junglers that it's paired with can actually utilize its pressure to get things done. So if you're in lower elo, I would say below Plat 1, then this is a champion that I wouldn't really recommend unless you're using it as a niche counter pick to something like Kassadin or Fizz or something. But in higher elo, I do think it, especially after this buff, we will see it a lot more. And this is a very nice buff, Q buff, helps for poke, early game, mid game. It's just an amazing buff. And total shots fired as well, a really nice buff for those all-ins. So overall, I think we will see a lot more Lucian mid, which is terrifying, which means I might have to potentially dabble in Lucian mid and learn this champion. Very annoying champion to deal with. Misfortune, base attack damage increase from 50 to 52, potentially trying to bring her back in the meta a bit. Morgana, Q cooldown, decrease, sorry. I don't think this changes too much. Nautilus, W shield decrease. I think it's a healthy change because Nautilus is very strong. Overall, we see it both pro play and in solo queue. Nico, Q damage increase. Now, Nico has been on my radar. Because pressure in mid lane is so important, Nico has been a champion traditionally that does get a lot of early pressure. And if she's able to get things done with that early pressure, she can actually utilize it to snowball very well and basically control every single dragon fight. As long as you're denying vision and then waiting for someone to face check and then getting that full combo off and positioning appropriately, coming in from the side, not just coming in front to back all the time. So Q damage increase, bloom damage increase. This is a very nice buff. This is going to make her early laning even more dominant. So yeah, Nico is something on my radar, but my main criticism with Nico is that even if she gets ahead, she's so squishy. Her build path is so squishy that if she messes up once, she can just get one shot and then she falls behind the curve and then she just gets obliterated. So again, similar to Lucian in that same vein, it's a very high skill cap champion. If you're great at, with the lane fundamentals, the mid lane fundamentals, you're very competent mechanically and you're able to maybe a duo with the jungle or maybe even higher elo. If you can do things with your early pressure to snowball, invade second buffs on spawn, stack dragons, stack rift heralds, then this champion can be a very effective solo queue champ or even competitive. We probably will see this more in competitive, to be honest with you. Nocturne. Passive cooldown. Okay, so I have had a lot of questions around this one, guys. So if you've watched my Nocturne mid guide, I talk a lot about this passive because this is the main reason mid Nocturne can exist. If he didn't have this passive, if he didn't get sustained to his passive, then he wouldn't be able to lane. He would just get poked out, harassed too much, wouldn't get enough gold to get to team at, that sort of thing. So, this is quite a big nerf, but I think this will only mainly affect his levels like 1 to 6 and his pre-Tiamat laning. If you are still good at aiming your Q, you might have to base for 2 longswords instead of being able to stay in lane all the way to Tiamat now. I don't know. I need to experiment with this more. I still think we will see it, but there'll be some matchups where you'll get punished a lot more. Potentially in some of those low cooldown harass lanes like Zoe, like Rumble, especially Akali, I think it will be really, really hard. But conversely, all those higher cooldown champions, I think you'll still be completely fine. So, I think this was an appropriate change though, because Nocturne was a little bit ridiculous, especially in those lower elos. So if you do play Nocturne mid, I wouldn't stress too much. Maybe I'd just be a little bit more careful about when you take it, but I do need to try and test this for myself to get a more practical or pragmatic theory or opinion off this change. So bear with me on that one. Rakan, our bonus movement's been increased. Interesting. Recon has probably one of the most incredible kits in the entire game. Recon, in my opinion, is either extremely strong or not seen at all. All she needs is one little buff, and then she'll be in the meta, and she'll be picked every single game. Will be picked every single game. So Rakan, very, very strong champion, a lot of utility, and I hope that Rakan does not come back because he's an absolute nightmare for a lot of mid champions. Set, W base damage decrease later, E base damage decrease later. I think this is a healthy change. Set was very strong right now. Makes sense. Kassadin, Q, total damage ratio increase, cost decrease. I don't think this is a change. This will change. I don't think this will change jungle Skarner, but it might make lane Skarner a little bit better. I think jungle Skarner is absolute dog poo right now. Just gets dominated in way too many junglers, and also because river skirmishing in general is the name of the game right now for jungle, and Skarner has some of the worst 2v2 skirmishing, so this champion is just not good in jungle right now. Syndra, Q base damage decrease later. Riot have been really hating on Syndra, which, to be honest with you, I can actually see why. It was unhealthy to have a champion in the game that could literally be blind picked confidently and still get pressure and win lane and scale. It's ridiculous. She ticked too many boxes. She had self-peel, she has burst damage, she has sustained damage, she can be a lane bully, she can play front-to-back team fights, she could take phase rush and scale. There were too many strengths of Syndra. So the way I see these changes to Syndra, what this is telling me is that you may have to go. She's less of a burst champion. She's more of like a sustained damage, in which you would go Archangels and just play front to back, scale heavy, take phase rush, like I talk about in my Syndra guide, and really play for those mid game team fights and be less of that early lane bully-esque champion. Although this isn't massive changes to the damage, I think this is more of an effect on level 5 later on, so you're going to have to spam a lot more abilities. So, I don't think she's dead. If you already had her in your pool, I still think she'll be fine. Although I think Orianna's a little bit better. But for the majority of players who played Syndra, I think it's still completely fine. You just have to adapt the pace in which you play the game. You have to play it a little bit slower, making sure you're taking, potentially experimenting with Archangels, potentially experimenting with Presence of Mind. I haven't really spoke about that, because one thing I did talk about with someone, a friend in my Discord, is that Archangels also synergizes very well with Presence of Mind, because Presence of Mind obviously giving you more resources, which synergizes very well with Archangels for the extra AP. So anyway, that could be a potentially direction you might want to go down if you're a Syndra player. But I do think she is considerably weaker than, say, Orianna. Now, Tristana. Now deals 1% increased damage per 3% crit strike chance. Now, this is not a mid lane Tristana buff. This is a bot lane Tristana buff, because if you're playing mid lane Tristana, a lot of the time you're building Bork, you can't afford to go crit because the itemization path is so poor. Like, if you're having to rush something like an IE or a PD in mid lane, it's pretty subpar. Although you can rush PD in mid lane because it builds out a Zeal and it's okay, and you do get that defensive capability, but largely it's way too slow. Like, after you finish your PD, then you have to go to IE, and then you build Pickaxe or Cloak or whatever. It's just really bad for a mid laner. Whereas bot lane, you can get away with it. You're playing for your 3-item spike anyway, and you have supports there to kind of hold your hand and get you through that specific item path. So I think this is a very big buff to crit Tristana. I don't know if we will see it a little bit more. I don't know. So yeah, we'll kind of see how this changes the bot lane meta. I don't know. I have to keep an open mind about that one. Veigar, base magic, resist increase. I think this is a healthy change because Veigar's kind of been getting outperformed and just dominated by a lot of higher range champions like Victor, Orianna, Syndra that can just basically bully Veigar. So I have a soft spot for Veigar. I think he's an awesome champion. I think he's healthy for the game. I think that they need to make him give him a little bit more safety in his early laning phase, because right now at the high level he just gets completely destroyed. Volibear, Q bonus movement speed decrease. I think this was a healthy change as well. I think Volibear personally is a very strong champion right now. I don't really know enough about the champion's identity, but all I can tell you is when I'm in solo queue and I see a Volibear jumping on my head and twerking on my face, I do not like it. I do not enjoy it one bit. So I'm happy that they're doing anything to remove this champion or at least decrease its effectiveness. Yasuo, base magic resist increase, R base damage increase later. Now, I have seen people in my Discord saying, oh my god, Yasuo buff is going to get like banned every game. I still think that I'm still trying to do a video on how to beat Yasuo. I think it has obvious counterplay. I think people make very obvious mistakes when versing Yasuo, which actually let Yasuo into the game. And the biggest mistake I see when people verse Yasuo is that they take really poor trades, especially level 3, level 4, but largely levels 1 to 6, which lead into a very poor recall, which leads into poor itemization, which leads into Yasuo being able to increase the pace of the game, create chaos, blow your flash, and make it really hard for you to set up ganks. And one of the biggest weaknesses of Yasuo, guys, is that he's very vulnerable to ganks. So, if you take a chill pill, relax, farm your ass off, get to your Lost Chapter, or get to your Seekers, then stay healthy enough for when your jungler is on the map, in the area, set up a gank, blow his flash, then he's not going to be able to trade as aggressively. And then, once you get Lost Chapter, or you get Seekers plus blue buff, it's game over. You will slowly start to win trades, and it'll be really hard for Yasuo to win the game. So, but I'll talk about this in a separate video. I just don't verse many Yasuo, so I'm really struggling to make the video. I might have to potentially go on a Smurf to verse more Yasuos and really kind of make that video. But let me know if that's a video that you guys would want to see. I do think this is a nice change though, because and something that people don't understand about base magic resist is that magic resist is actually hard to build for a lot of these champions, because they don't want to delay their item spike. They don't want to sit on a null magic mantle when they really want to finish their berserker greaves. They want to get to their PD, they want to get to their IE. They don't want to waste 450 gold on a null magic mantle. So any form of base magic resist increase really pays dividends over the course of a long laning phase. If you're reducing 10 damage every single ability across a 5-minute period, you're potentially saving something like 100 200 HP, which is a few health pots. So magic resist overall, base magic resist is a very nice change for Yasuo. I don't really know whether this damage is going to be overly meaningful. I think the magic resist is the big buff, but a nice quality of life change for Yasuo. It will be interesting to see how prevalent this champion will be in differing elos. Now, Ziggs' passive bonus damage ratio now flat, maximum damage to structures increased, bumping up this bombing bug to better bonk down buildings, and more importantly, to bring an artillery mage into the meta. This is interesting because we have seen a lot more of these champions in the meta given the prevalency of archangels and the prevalency of presence of mind. So it seems like Riot, I don't know what they're trying to do, but they're trying to increase the strength of split pushers, but then increase the effectiveness of these mana hungry artillery mages in a way. So in saying that, this is a very nice both lane buff. It basically buffs every single element of Ziggs' kit, gives him stronger early trades, allows him to get towers a lot easier. Basically overall effectiveness, mid game, early game, and late game. So I'm really, really happy that they're doing this because I personally love Ziggs. I might actually have to try this out in solo queue because I'm actually I used to be a Ziggs one trick in like season 4, and I got really high challenger with it. I got like 800 LP or 900 LP with Ziggs alone as one of my favorite champions. So I'm really happy that we're seeing potentially more Ziggs. I'll have to try it out. If I were to come up with a build, I would definitely go Archangels and I definitely would go Presence of Mind secondary, because these two obviously synergize as well. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how this changes these matchups. Although one of the biggest counters to Ziggs is Yasuo, so you got to be a little bit careful about when you're picking Ziggs. And now that we're seeing more buffs to Yasuo, we got to be a bit careful about that. And there are some champions that can really dominate Ziggs. A lot of those early pressure champions, Leblanc and the likes of the Kassadin and Leblanc, can really dominate Ziggs. So you got to be careful about blind picking it. I think it is something that you would pick later in the draft when you're seeing a very low threat composition. But it can be decent to have in your pool. So it's something that I'll kind of keep an eye on and experiment within my own games. Now for Nimbus Cloak changes. So there's actually so many people that didn't actually know the way Nimbus Cloak worked. How you got differing amounts of movement speed based off the cooldown of that specific summoner spell. So I believe that this change, so just to quickly talk about Nimbus Cloak overall before we get into the changes, Nimbus Cloak, I think I spoke about this in my last video, was how prevalent this was. This is like a meta rune right now. This is like the season rune. Presence of Mind and Nimbus Cloak are the two runes that basically everyone is loving right now. Now, the main reason Nimbus Cloak is so strong is because it gives champions that don't necessarily have mobility inbuilt in their kit more access to mobility, which can compensate for a massive weakness inbuilt within their kit. Now, with the ability for junglers like Graves, Nidalee, Kha'Zix, who don't necessarily have obvious gap closers, or Kha'Zix does have a gap closer, but more like Graves and Nidalee, things like that, it really kind of filled that weakness. Now, and also champions like Set with Hex Flash and things like that, it's pretty crazy. So with these champions that really rely on Smite, which is a low cooldown summoner, I think this is actually a pretty big nerf. So we actually might see progressively more champions like Graves stray away from the sorcery tree and phase rush, and potentially more into fleet footwork. Because the precision tree is actually very good for champions like Graves, because they get access to Legend Alacrity, which is very, very solid for Graves. I don't know about other champions, but this is just my theory. We might even see secondary inspiration on Kha'Zix instead of Nimbus Cloak for Magical Footwear Cosmic Insight, which is also very valuable in Kha'Zix. So I don't know. I don't think it will be an overnight thing. I think people will slowly realize on some of these junglers that rely on Nimbus Cloak for the movement speed, they will progressively stray away from it. But for champions like Galileo, for champions like or 80 carries and things like that, who basically only use the highest tier of the bonus movement speed because they're only using it with Flash essentially, or TP, then I think Nimbus Cloak is still completely fine. I think Galileo would be fine with it. I think all the 80 carries will be fine with it. I think even TF will be fine with it. It's more the jungle. I think this is more a nerf to junglers right now, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's just my take on it. The rest of these kind of useless. I don't know what this is. Some bug fixes, whatever. Now skins. The only skin here that really interests me, I don't even think this Spirit Blossom Ari looks good. This Spirit Blossom Cassio looks pretty cool. That's maybe a skin I might buy. I like Cassio. And if we're going to quickly talk about the actual skin color, I kind of like this one. I don't even know why. This one's the coolest. It reminds me of the Coin Emperor Tarm. There's a chroma of the Coin Emperor Tarm. That's pretty cool as well. But anyway, let's get into the 10.16 tier list. So, where do we start, guys? Let's actually start with S tier, because sometimes there actually isn't any S tier champions and there isn't any D tier champions. The way I interpret S tier is that they probably need nerfs. They're a little bit too strong. And then there's D tier champions that probably need some considerable buffs. So, off the top of my head here, the only S tier one is Zoe. And I am going to do this through the lens of a relatively high elo tier list. This is going to be, Diamond 1 plus or Master tier plus. And I will talk about low elo later on, potentially update the low elo tier list within my Discord. But for the sake of practicality and helping the most people, I think, and just getting an overall gauge at the highest level, I think this will be the most useful way to do it. So, Zoe, in my opinion, ticks every single box. Great skirmishing, gets pressure in a lot of matchups, can change around runes to optimize the way she navigates matchups. She can take Electrocute and Heavy Burst 2v2. She can take Area and Isolated 1v1s or low range matchups and constantly proc Area with Q and auto attacks, her passive, that sort of thing. I just think she's very, very strong. Yes, the Nimbus Cloak nerfs hurt her a little bit, given that all her spell thieves, her W, all of them are the lowest tier of the Nimbus Cloak movement speed. But still, in saying that, I don't think that that was the main reason she was really strong. I still think she's just strong in general as a champion outside of the Nimbus Cloak, even if you were taking Mana Flow Band or something. That's just my take on it. I think she is a little bit overtuned and very annoying to deal with at the highest level, and a very high skill cap champion. Now, let's actually go through here. I still think Galileo is A tier in high elo solo queue games. Yes, there was spellbook nerfs, which I didn't really feel much at all. Yes, there was Nimbus Cloak nerfs, but I don't think this affects Galileo too much. I still think Galileo is an A tier mid laner in high elo, way too flexible, great 2v2 skirmishing. Can always find ways or creative ways to get into skirmishes, make plays happen. In lower elo, it's probably a little bit lower because you can't really rely on certain people to utilize the lead that you give them. But in high elo, it's all about mid-jungle 2v2. It's all about pressure. It's all about skirmishing. And Galileo really fits that mold. I think Fizz is actually pretty good in high elo solo queue. I'll leave it A tier for now. We'll come back to Fizz. Akali, I can't say that she's A tier because she doesn't. It takes too long to spike. So I'm going to put her in B tier for now. We'll come back to that one as well. Silas is very situational. There are some games where Silas can absolutely pop off due to the quality of the ultimates within the game. But conversely, if say you blind pick Silas, you get counterpicked by something like a Zoe or like an Aurelia mid, or like not even Aurelia. There's actually way worse than Aurelia. There's like even like Lucian mid or something. There's some very hardcore counters to Silas. He's not a good blind pick. You can get destroyed. But if you have it later in the draft, you see something like, you see basically any champion with a somewhat decent ultimate. Even if the mid matchup's hard, say you're playing Silas versus Orianna, you can take Fleet, you can minimize your first item spike, but you see a Malphite on the enemy team, you see like a Nocturne, you see an Ashe, you see all these very good ultimates in the game, then you can just run over, you can completely take over the entire game. So to be honest, I might even make a second tier here. I might actually make one below called A-, and then add one here. Wait, what did I just do? So change this one to A. Guess this one's A, and then let's just make this one A-. Because I think like he's like an A-, to be honest with you. I'm gonna put Fizz in A- as well. Okay, what else we got here? Kassadin, I still think he is very strong in solo queue in my region anyway. He has a lot of decent matchups. I'm going to put him in A-. Maybe even an A, but I'll keep him in A- for now. Echo, also a very strong champion. I think he's always strong in solo queue. A- or A? Probably A. Actually, I want to talk a little bit more about Kassadin, guys. So, the thing about Kassadin, because fleet footwork feels so strong, and because a lot of the junglers in the meta are low threat, low CC, Kassadin can largely escape the entire early laning or early portion of the game, reliably farm to Rod of Ages, and kind of take over the game. But because we have seen a little bit more CC coming out of bot lane, we've seen a lot more Ashe and things like that who can really lock down Kassadin. It is a little bit more risky. So I am maybe going to keep it at A-. But overall, I think Kassadin has a lot of great matchups. It demolishes Silas, demolishes Fizz, good into Galileo, good into Echo, good into Akali. It's basically good. It's even decent into Zoe if you can play really well as well. So it actually has a lot of decent meta matchups right now. So I'm going to actually probably keep it in A tier for solo queue. Not competitive, but this is just for solo queue. Fizz is one of those champions. Just talking quickly about Fizz. It's like, because again, solo queue is all about those 2v2 skirmishes, chaos, just river fights, that sort of thing. Fizz can always find something to get done, and in high elo, the junglers really know how to utilize Fizz's strength, but it does have a very high skill cap. It feels like if you don't really understand the champion's identity, know exactly what your items that you're trying to base on, really know wave manipulation, how you want to manipulate the early waves to get a certain base. If you don't do that and you autopilot, you get obliterated so quickly. But if you really watch like Mango Fish or Mango Dog, whatever, he has a very specific way of dodging abilities with E, taking solid trades, basing on a certain amount of gold. taking that early sweep of this unique strategy, you actually can turn Fizz from an unreliable mid lane assassin to a somewhat reliable skirmish oriented assassin. All right, what else we got here? Zia in solo queue. I'm gonna just put it down to C tier. It's okay, but it's just too slow at the moment. Karthus Mid, I've seen it quite a bit. For me personally, whenever I've seen Karthus, it always goes jungle. I've probably seen it like once or twice. I don't know about the regions you guys are in, how common it is. From the one game that I did see it, it seemed quite effective. So I'm actually going to put it in B tier because it seemed quite hard to deal with. And the wave clear was really annoying. So I'm going to keep it in B tier for now. We might change that a little bit later. Corki, too slow in solo queue. Lucian Mid, I'm actually going to put it all the way up to A tier here, like for the reasons I spoke about in the tier list, especially after the buffs. Very strong champion right now. Actually, no, I'll keep that there. LeBlanc's a tricky one because LeBlanc and high elo in certain games can be really effective, but then conversely, it has some hardcore counter picks like Lissandra and Kassadin that can just dominate it. So I feel like if it's a good LeBlanc game, you're counter picking some immobile mage, it can be decent. But it doesn't do well into Zoe. Zoe's traditionally done really well into it. It does good into Silas. It does good into Echo. It does decent into Fizz. It does good into Galileo. Maybe put it up to A- or B. Keep it at B for now. Because it's a little bit... I'm gonna put it at A- for now. Ziggs. Now, I haven't tried Ziggs first since the buff. The buff is quite nice, but I am going to put it around... Maybe there needs to be a B+. Honestly, I know this sounds a little bit ridiculous, guys, but I kind of feel like there has to be a B+. I know I didn't expect to do it like this, guys, but I think there needs to be a B+ tier here. I'm going to put this here. Maybe there doesn't need to be. Let's remove that for now. I don't know where Fizz... I'm going to keep Fizz. I'm going to keep Ziggs in C. No, I'm going to put it in B. I'm going to put it in B. I think it could be quite annoying to deal with in solo queue. I'm going to keep an open mind and put it in B tier for now. I need to... Let's go through the rest of the champions and I might update that a little bit later. Because the way I like to do this tier list, guys, I got to get the creative juices flowing. I got to put things... Because... Tier lists are not about how strong they are individually. It's about how they deal comparatively to the other champions in the meta as well. So we need to get all of them through, and then we'll shuffle them around as we get a little bit deeper here. Syndra, I think she's quite weak right now. I'm going to put her in C here. Nocturne, I think quite solid. I'll put it in B. Put in B in solo queue. I think Ahri's actually quite strong, decently strong at the moment. I'm going to put Ahri in B. Ahri's crept up on my radar a little bit. I want to keep an eye on Ahri. I think Aurelia is very underrated right now. I'm going to put Aurelia in A-. Rise, too weak right now. Orianna, I think actually Orianna's potentially A or A-. Probably A- or A. I actually can put it in A. I think Orianna's actually very strong right now. I think Orianna is a very strong champion. And the reason being is that the Archangels build, I found to be very effective. Going Archangels into Rabadons. So you go Archangels into Deathcap. And the reason this build I found to be very successful is because traditionally you want durability through HP. But because a lot of your durability now can come through the active of Archangels, plus the extra AP you get from Deathcap, the raw AP, really helps the your E-shield. So your durability is coming from shields from these two specific sources rather than HP, which you would have conversely got from a Liandry's or a Morello's. So if you can get away with this sort of greedy build path and still survive, then you should always go for it. So I've been having a lot of success with that specific build path. That's why I'm going to put Orianna in A tier for now. Victor, a little bit slow. I've tried to make Victor work in high elo solo queue, but it just doesn't work. Your early skirmishing is too bad. Your 1v1s are great, but as soon as it turns into a river skirmish, it just gets way too chaotic, and it's really not good for Victor. Katarina, I would say she's still a solid champion right now. Put her in B tier for now. We might come to that a little bit later. Vel'Koz C tier, a little bit too slow. Yasuo, put it up in. I'm going to put Yasuo up here in A minus. I think he's can be good in some certain situations. Again, less of a. Actually, if we think about these champions here, Zoe does fine into Yasuo. Aurelia does fine. Leblanc does good. Fizz does good. Echo does okay. It's like meh. Silas actually does not do that well into Yasuo. Ori does okay. It's like unfavored, but Ori can always minimize very easily. Bad, bad, bad. So I actually think maybe Yasuo goes down a little bit given how poor the matchups are. Yeah, I'm gonna put here in B. I'm gonna put him in B. Or Yasuo might be a B plus. Keep an open mind, but I'm gonna put him in B for now. What else we got here with Cassio? I think people hype Cassio so much. I think she's just too weak in solo queue, too slow. Doesn't have too many matchups. Lisandro's a champion that's been on my radar. In my solo queue games recently, I've actually been playing a lot of it. Consider I played like 5 or 6 games yesterday of it. I think it's strong. Not with Aftershock, with Electrocute. You go Electro, and then you go secondary Presence of Mind, because one of the biggest problems I found with Lissandra was mana. Now with Presence of Mind, you don't really have mana problems. You can spam abilities. You go, and I like to actually go Proto into Death Cap if I'm ahead, and your burst damage with Electrocute is out of this world. Or you can actually go Proto into Zhonya's if you need the durability, then into Death, or the utility, sorry, and then you can actually go Death Cap after that. It's a champion that I've been experimenting with, and I really like it. So I'm actually going to put it in A minus, and it does well into a considerable amount of these champions in the meta. TF, I'm going to say B right now. It struggles a little bit in solo queue, in my opinion. But it does synergize well with the top meta. So I'm actually going to put it in A minus because TF is very good with Camille, it's very good with Fiora, and it's very good with Jax in solo queue. So if we see more of those in solo queue, TF will be stronger. So I'm going to put TF there. Zed, I think Zed is decently strong in solo queue, but again has a very high skill cap. But I think if played properly in the right composition, if you have an Evelyn jungle, you have a Karthus, that sort of thing, it can work. So I am going to put Zed A minus here. Diana, I'm going to put it... No, I'm going to put it down here. I don't think it's... I mean, it's nice, but it's not super, super nice. Might come back to that a little bit later. What else we got here? We got Vlad, too slow in high yellow solo queue. Gets countered by nearly all these champions. Nico? It's going to interest me. I'm gonna go ahead and say Nico's B tier for now because of those buffs. It really depends on how much that changes her early laning phase. But in solo queue, she does get obliterated by a lot of these champs. Like Silas, a lot of these champs do really, really well. Especially Kassadin, Lucian, Orianna does okay into Nico. Like, all these champions can do quite well into Nico. So maybe she isn't. I don't know. But for now, I'm just going to keep her at B. We might change that a little bit later. Because, okay, it's less about... Nico, because she's so squishy... She does kind of have to take into account the 1v1. Yes, she's great in 2v2s, but if she can't survive the laning phase, there's no point talking about the 2v2s. ASOL, I haven't seen much at all. I'm just going to put him in C tier now. I just don't see him. I think he struggles too much in all these 1v1s. Talia's on my radar. Given the pace of the game right now, I think it could be quite decent. I'm going to put it in B tier. I think it can work in high yellow solo queue. Rumble, I think it's another solid high yellow pressure pick that can be quite well. I actually think Camille Mid is a very good niche counter pick to some of these assassins, so I'm going to put it in B tier. Kog'Maw Mid, I'm going to put it over here in this, in C. It's hard to put it in B right now. I'm so conflicted. I'm very conflicted. I feel like I need another tier here. I do. I need a B plus tier. I do. So I'm gonna turn this into B plus. Make it another color. What color should I make? Here, this. Oh, dude, I've screwed up these color schemes. Man, whatever. Because this should go here, and then I think there's like a tier above. I think like, I kind of think that. These potentially will go here. keep that for now. I'm going to keep that for now. Maybe here. Maybe that. Yeah, I'm going to keep that for now. Because these two champions, I can't tell their effectiveness yet because I don't know what is picked in other roles. I need more information about what is picked in other roles because Kog'Maw and Ziggs, they're not necessarily about the 1v1. They're about the game. If you're versing a lot of low threat champions with a lot of lack of engage, then you can potentially, like, you can minimize any of these matchups, but give pressure. I don't know how meaningful it will be for you to be able to stall out the game. I don't know yet. So I'm going to keep an open mind, keeping them in B tier, and then I might update that later on within my Discord to see how the meta is shaping up in other roles. And this is why, guys, I don't do tier lists super often because I want to play the game a lot to figure it out. I like these tier lists to be as practical as possible. Set mid is viable into certain matchups, but given it did get a little bit of a nerf, I'm just going to put it in C tier for now. It's too niche. Xerath, again, similar to these champions. Maybe Syndra should be here. Oh, man. I don't know yet. I mean, again, I haven't tried those Syndra nerfs yet. My assumption is that it probably will be C or B tier. In higher, maybe B tier, because I still think Syndra will have a place. I'm going to put it there. I think Panth is very niche. I'm just going to put it C tier. Can be good in as a certain counter pick to specific champions like Zed, and decent like Yasuo and things like that. And not even actually. It's just not worth it. I'm just going to put it in D tier. It feels very weak right now. What else we got here? We got a bit of, what else am I missing? Zillion down here. Anivia. Maybe with the Archangel's presence of mind. I think it actually is C tier. It's not D tier. Actually, I'm gonna move Vlad up to C tier because I actually think it's not terrible. And because it's actually good into some of these assassins as well. It's actually good into Yasuo. It's decent into can be good into Fizz if the Fizz doesn't really know the matchup, know how to push the pace of the game. Not really good into any of the other ones, so I'm just going to keep it at C. Renekton mid, I like Renekton mid into a lot of these melee, so I'm going to actually put Renekton up here. Kiana, I've actually seen more Kiana. I'm running Kiana in B tier in high elo games. I think it's okay. Karma, I'm going to put it in C tier. Yeah, I'm going to put it in C tier as a situational niche pick. Lulu down here, Kale down here, Mordekaiser down here, Cho'Gath down here, Jace, I'm putting it in C tier. I think Jace is kind of on the edge. We might see it eventually if we see some more changes in the meta. But as, again, a nice little niche pick. Heimerdinger, D tier. Heimerdinger is interesting. It's not terrible, but I'm going to just keep it on D tier because I just feel like it's underutilized and people don't understand the champion. And it is more of a river skirmish meta. It doesn't suit Heimerdinger. What am I missing here? Malzahar, high elo, D tier. Just loses every lane. High mana cost. Oh, Talon. I'm missing Talon. Talon, B+. Definitely a B+ champ. Not terrible. Veigar. I'm going to put a C tier. There's niche games where it's good versus low range compositions. Low engage. Nunu mid. I think it's... I'm going to put a B tier in solo queue because it does get pressure in a lot of matchups. But people are starting to realize that it's just a bit of a gimmick and it can be beaten relatively easy as long as you avoid the snowball. You thin the wave with taking one row of attack speed, thin the wave. Ward appropriately, ping way in advance. If it doesn't get those early kills off and the mid laner versing it gets like lost chapter, it's GG. Is that everything? Is that all the champs? Feels like there's no champs. Pike Mid, I think Pike Mid is just very underwhelming now since the changes, so probably C or D tier. Probably D tier. Annie, D tier and high elo. Malphite Mid, I don't see any Malphite Mid, so I'm just not going to put it in there. Fiddlesticks Mid, I don't really see it since those nerfs, so I'm not going to put it in there either. Cannon Mid, I don't see it, so I'm not going to put it in there. Shen, no. I think that's everything. Am I missing any champions here, guys? Hopefully I'm not missing anything. I think that's all of them. I think that's all of them. Okay. So, now let's actually fix them up a little bit. Let's fix them up. So, we got Zoe here at the top. Makes a lot of sense. I think these all make a lot of sense for solo queue anyway. Maybe Galileo down a bit. Maybe Galileo down a bit because Galileo has a considerable amount of counter picks. It doesn't do that well into Zoe. It doesn't do well into Kassadin. It doesn't do well into Lucian. It doesn't do well into LeBlanc. It doesn't do well into Aurelia. A lot of these champions do quite well into Galileo. So I'm actually going to move it down to A1. I think these champions are solid here. Any of these move any of these? Maybe Fizz down to B+. Potentially. No, I'm going to keep it at A- as a solid solo queue pick. LeBlanc and Zed, I think they have niche spots in high elo games only. Lower elo, no. The reason I'm putting Lissandra so high here is because I really do think that in high elo solo queue games, her CC, her burst threat, her 2v2 skirmishing is very... There's so many opportunities to utilize it. So that's just a personal preference. I am going to keep it there. I think this makes sense. Would I move any of these ones here? These are the ones that potentially I might move. Syndra, I'm unsure yet, guys. I need to test this more, but my theory is that it will still be somewhat in there because you can still take Phase Rush, you can deal Scale, Gathering Storm, etc. Play that's minimized, potentially try the Archangel's Presence and Mind setup. I don't know. That's something I want to test out. Karthus, it's hard for me to even put it in B tier. I might actually put it B. I might actually put it C tier because Karthus, I think, will struggle a lot against these high-range mages and the assassins. So I'm going to put it C tier. Karma might even be D tier at the moment in solo queue. Yeah, I might actually put D tier because of Nimbus Cloak nerfs, so we might see less Graves, potentially less Graves. So I'm going to put it in D tier in mid lane right now in solo queue anyway. These all make a lot of sense. Bang, bang, bang. Renekton might even be B tier. Oh, not put in C tier. It's too niche. Any of the other champs? Lulu, Ryze, Corki. Corki's too slow. Ryze too slow. Pantheon too slow. Oh, not too slow. It's just useless. Doesn't win trades. Lulu just loses trades. Annie too slow. Low range. Unreliable. Kale too slow. Mordekaiser too niche. Cho niche. Hyman niche. Blah blah blah. These are all lame. There could be Cassio could go to B tier in those specific matchups, but again, I don't think Cassio would do well into any of these I'm trying to think in these 1v1s. Cassio doesn't really do well, so I can't justify putting Cassio anything above that. She just doesn't get enough pressure. Like, at least I honestly think COG can get more pressure than Cassio in a lot of these matchups. That's just my take on it, especially once you get to tier, but I might be wrong. Honestly, I think this is looking pretty solid. I think this makes a lot of sense. This is my initial theory, my initial take on things based off the patch notes that just came out. I need to do a lot more testing. Talia might go down to C tier because maybe he just gets bullied too much by a lot of these assassins. So I actually might move Talia down to C tier. But I have heard a lot of good things about Talia with Presence of Mind. If the stories are true, there's something I need to test, then maybe it might go up to B tier because it does complement that fast-paced skirmish 2v2 oriented mid-meta, in my opinion. So, let me know if you have any questions. I'll post this in the Discord. I might update it at some point as I get more information. But I think this is a very good starting point. If you have any questions about anything that I spoke about in this video, guys, if you want to see this more often, give any feedback, really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, guys. Cheers.